It was a warm spring morning in Atlanta, the kind that made the sidewalks feel alive. Birds chirped above rows of magnolia trees, soft sunlight glinted off parked cars, and early risers sipped coffee on their porches or took long, aimless walks. The city felt calm, like everything was in its rightful place. At the corner of Peachtree Avenue and Stillwater Drive stood the Northbridge Women's Center, a sleek state-of-the-art medical facility known for its elite clientele and immaculate aesthetics. The exterior gleamed with glass panels and brushed steel, and the building's signage engraved in gold carried an air of exclusivity. Inside, the temperature was perfectly controlled. The scent of lavender mixed with antiseptic and a curated classical playlist hummed quietly beneath the hum of recessed lighting. The waiting room looked more like a luxury lounge than a clinic, leather chairs spaced intentionally apart, perfectly arranged flower bouquets on marble side tables, and designer magazines that hadn't been flipped through. Into this pristine environment stepped Monica Reynolds, a 32-year-old black woman in her third trimester of pregnancy. She wore a soft sky blue maternity dress that fit her comfortably and clean sneakers that had clearly walked many miles. A canvas tote bag with slightly frayed handles hung from her shoulder. Her skin glowed with that unmistakable maternal sheen, and her expression carried the quiet strength of someone who had endured more than most would ever understand. Monica wasn't a stranger to these environments, but she knew what it felt like to be watched, judged, or dismissed in them. She took a slow breath as she approached the main entrance, pressing her hand gently to her round belly. Her husband, Jerome, had promised to meet her here. He had been called into an urgent meeting at the Department of Justice, but assured her he'd be there before the appointment began. She believed him. Jerome had never broken a promise. Still, as she pushed through the glass doors and stepped into the silent, polished lobby, Monica felt the familiar chill of being out of place. The receptionist, a young white woman in her mid-20s, barely looked up from her computer. Other patients, all dressed in expensive athleisure and carrying designer handbags, glanced at Monica, then turned away with quiet indifference. Despite the luxury, or maybe because of it, the space hummed with a coded message. "You don't belong here." But Monica held her head high. She was here for her baby. She was here for herself. And no sideways glance or cold shoulder was going to change that. Taking a seat in one of the leather chairs, Monica checked the time, 10:17 a.m. Her appointment was at 10:30. She rubbed her belly gently and whispered, "We're almost there, little one. Just a little longer." Outside, the sun continued to shine, but inside Northbridge, a storm was quietly building. Monica didn't expect warmth. She didn't expect compliments on her glow or polite small talk about the baby's due date. But she had hoped for professionalism. What she met instead was silence, calculated, practiced, dismissive. As she waited in the luxurious lobby, the air around her thickened, not with noise but with tension. She noticed it in the way a woman clutching a Prada purse shifted in her seat and turned her body slightly away. She noticed it in how a middle-aged white man, possibly accompanying his wife, looked at her belly, then quickly averted his eyes like it offended his sense of order. The Northbridge Women's Center projected comfort, but only for those who fit the mold, affluent white, accompanied and visible within the unspoken hierarchy of belonging. Monica's very presence disrupted that illusion. At 10:28, a nurse emerged from one of the side corridors. Dressed in pale green scrubs, she scanned the room, her eyes briefly settling on Monica. "Monica Reynolds," she called without smiling. Monica stood slowly, her hand pressing gently against the small of her back. She gathered her tote and offered the nurse a soft smile. "That's me," she said. The nurse said nothing in return. She turned on her heel and began walking down the hallway. Monica followed her footsteps, echoing against the smooth tile floor. No words of reassurance, no warmth, just the mechanical hum of a clinic that had decided without question that she was not one of them. The hallway was immaculate, framed portraits of smiling white mothers holding newborns adorned the walls. Monica glanced at them as she walked, searching in vain for a single face that looked like hers. She felt it again, that quiet alienation that didn't scream, didn't threaten, but wrapped itself around her like fog. The nurse stopped at exam room 3B, pushed the door open, and gestured without a word. Monica entered and sat on the edge of the exam table. She smoothed the hem of her dress and took a deep breath. It was 10:32. Jerome was late. She tried not to let it sting. Minutes passed. Then the door opened with a soft click, and Dr. Gretchen Emerson stepped in. Tall, composed, perfectly dressed, and perfectly cold. She didn't greet Monica. She didn't smile. She didn't even acknowledge her pregnancy. Instead, her sharp gray eyes scanned Monica up and down like she was an unscheduled disruption. "So you're Monica Reynolds?" she asked flatly. Monica nodded, straightening her posture. "Yes, good morning. I believe today is our 4D scan." Dr. Emerson's lip twitched in what might have been a smirk. "You came alone," she said almost as an accusation. "My husband had an emergency." "He's on his way," Monica replied calmly. "Of course he is," the doctor murmured, turning away to shuffle through papers on the counter. Then came the first blow, sharp, cutting, and soaked in prejudice. "Let me guess," Dr. Emerson said without turning around. "You're not sure who the father is. Or maybe he decided this morning he wasn't interested in being responsible." Monica's mouth opened, slightly shocked, into silence. "Excuse me," she said, voice trembling. Dr. Emerson finally turned, meeting her eyes with a cold stare. "Look, this is a private facility. We serve women who prioritize their health and their baby's future, not people who wander in from the bus station hoping for charity." Monica stood slowly, her fists clenched at her sides. "I scheduled this appointment 2 weeks ago. I confirmed it last night. I came here respectfully." The doctor stepped closer, her voice lowered to a hiss. "People like you are always respectful when you need something. Then you accuse us, disrupt our staff, and make a scene. Not today." Monica's heart pounded. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. The assumptions, the insults, the venom hidden beneath the veneer of professionalism. She took a deep breath and said firmly, "I'm leaving. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected." But Dr. Emerson wasn't finished. She glanced at the countertop. "Funny," she said. "I left my Cartier watch right here this morning. Now it's gone." Her eyes locked on Monica. "Security will be here shortly. Let's see what they find in that bag of yours." Monica froze. 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind, but only one settled. "This is happening because of who I am and how I look." Monica didn't even have time to respond. Before she could protest, the exam room door swung open and slammed shut behind Dr. Emerson. She was alone, her heart racing, her mind spinning. The accusation felt surreal. She hadn't even touched the doctor's things, hadn't gone near the counter. She had come for a checkup for her baby, and now she was being treated like a criminal. Panic crept in, but she pressed her hand against her belly and took a long, steady breath. "Stay calm," she whispered to herself. "Stay calm for the baby." Within moments, heavy footsteps approached from the hallway. The door opened again, this time not with a click, but with a firm shove. 2 security officers entered, both white, both in stiff navy uniforms. One was older, holding a clipboard, his face lined with exhaustion. The other was younger, bulkier, with a shaved head and a wad of gum chewing in slow, deliberate rhythm. Neither of them introduced themselves. "Miss Reynolds," the older guard said, his tone sharp but mechanical. "We've had a report of missing property. You've been identified as a person of interest. We need you to come with us." Monica blinked, stunned. "I haven't taken anything. This has to be a mistake," she said, trying to stay composed. "We'll sort that out downstairs," the younger guard interrupted, already stepping forward. "You can explain yourself in the security office." She instinctively stepped back. "I'm pregnant," she said. "I don't feel safe being escorted like this. My husband is on his way. I just want to wait for him." "You'll have your chance," the older man said, "but you need to come with us now." Monica looked at their faces, blank, indifferent. She realized she didn't have a choice. With one hand on her belly and the other gripping the strap of her tote, she nodded silently and followed them down the hallway. They didn't take her through the main corridor, but down a side path marked staff only. She passed locked cabinets, gray walls, flickering lights, and silence. Not the kind of silence that comforts, the kind that isolates. They stopped in front of a gray metal door. No window, no label. The younger guard opened it and gestured her inside. The room smelled like stale coffee and bleach. A metal desk sat in the center, bolted to the floor, flanked by 2 plastic chairs. A single fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting shadows on a wall of outdated security monitors. "Sit," the younger one ordered. Monica sat slowly. The chair was cold and hard. She adjusted her dress to cover her knees and placed her trembling hands over her belly. "I need to call my husband," she said softly. "He needs to know where I am." "Phone," the guard snapped. "Hand it over." "What? No, I just want to." "You're not under arrest." the older guard said, cutting her off. But you are being detained for investigation. Cooperation will make this easier. Monica hesitated but handed over her phone. The younger guard snatched it, powered it off, and slid it into a drawer with a heavy thud. Her heart began pounding. You can't just take my phone, she said. There's no proof I took anything. I didn't even go near her counter. We're not here to argue, the older man said. We're here to verify the report. But impregnant, she snapped, her voice shaking. I came here for a medical appointment. I don't deserve this. The guards exchanged a glance but said nothing. The younger one leaned against the wall, chewing his gum louder, now smirking slightly. Save the performance, he said. It won't help you. Monica's throat tightened. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Not in front of them. She wouldn't give them that. Her baby shifted inside her, as if sensing her distress. She closed her eyes and breathed slowly, deliberately. In, out, in, out. She would survive this. She had to. Time passed. No one questioned her. No one searched her. They were just holding her there because they could. She stared at the blank wall, wondering if Jerome had arrived. Would he know where to find her? Would the front desk even tell him what she didn't know? Was that at that very moment Jerome Reynolds had just walked through the front doors of the clinic. At precisely 10:59 a.m., Jerome Reynolds stepped through the glass front doors of the Northbridge Women's Center. His polished black dress shoes tapped crisply against the pristine marble floor with every stride. He was dressed in a finely tailored charcoal gray suit, a silk tie with subtle navy stripes, and a small gold Department of Justice lapel pin gleaming on his left collar. He wasn't just another man entering a clinic. He carried the weight of federal authority and the quiet precision of someone who knew exactly what needed to be done. As he entered the lobby, heads turned, not because of his height or his striking dark mahogany skin, but because of the energy he brought. Calm, measured, dangerous in the way storms are before they break. He approached the front desk with direct eye contact, his deep voice unwavering. Good morning. My name is Jerome Reynolds. My wife, Monica Reynolds, had a 10:30 appointment with Dr. Emerson. Where is she? The young receptionist blonde, likely in her mid-20s, looked up startled. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard for a beat too long. Let me check, she stammered. Jerome didn't blink. Please do. Her eyes darted to the screen. She scrolled nervously, reading something he couldn't see. It says, she's not in the exam room anymore. I think security was notified. There was a misunderstanding, I think. What misunderstanding? His tone wasn't raised, but the sharpness of his question made her flinch. I think she's in the downstairs security office. Jerome's jaw tightened, but his voice remained controlled. Take me there. Now, I have to get the floor manager. No need. Jerome smoothly reached into his inside jacket pocket and pulled out a thin leather badge wallet. With a flick of his hand, he opened it and held it at eye level. The golden seal of the United States Department of Justice gleamed beneath the overhead lights along with his credentials, Deputy Director, Office of Civil Rights Enforcement. The receptionist's face paled. Her mouth opened slightly. Where is the security office? He repeated, quieter this time. More dangerous. Down the corridor, past the staff elevators. First door on the left, she whispered. Jerome nodded once. Then he turned and walked. Not rushed, not frantic, but every step held purpose. This wasn't the first time he'd walked into an institution to correct a wrong, but it was the first time the victim was his wife. That changed everything. The hallway smelled like antiseptic and bureaucracy. Behind the first door on the left, muffled voices echoed. He didn't knock. He pushed it open. Inside, Monica sat stiffly on a plastic chair, her hands resting protectively over her belly. Her face was composed, but her eyes were red from holding back emotion. Two security officers stood nearby. The younger one leaned against the wall, arms crossed, still chewing gum. The older one held a clipboard mid-sentence when Jerome entered. Can we help you? The older guard asked, eyebrows raised. Jerome stepped fully into the room and closed the door behind him. Yes, he said evenly. You can start by standing down and explaining, clearly and completely, why you've detained my pregnant wife without legal cause, denied her access to her phone, and failed to contact me. The guards froze. Monica turned toward him, eyes wide. Jerome. He walked to her side and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "I'm here. It's over." Then he turned back toward the guards. "Now, who authorized this detainment? Where is the incident report? And I want every second of surveillance footage related to my wife pulled up immediately." The younger officer straightened up suddenly, very aware of the badge on Jerome's lapel. "There's been a misunderstanding. The doctor filed a report, said she was missing a watch, identified Mrs. Reynolds as the last person in the room. Did you verify anything before detaining her?" Jerome's tone sharpened slightly. "We were following standard protocol. You're not trained in constitutional law." "I am," Jerome interrupted. "And what you've done here violates due process and civil rights statutes, including unlawful detainment and denial of communication. Shall I continue?" The room went quiet. Even the buzzing fluorescent light above seemed to grow louder. Jerome turned back to Monica. "Let's get you out of here," he said. Then with one final glance at the guards, he added, "This isn't over. But your authority in this room is." Jerome didn't waste a minute. Once Monica was safely by his side, he turned back to the two security officers, now both visibly uncomfortable. "Show me the surveillance footage," he said, voice low, but commanding. "Now." The older officer hesitated, his eyes flicking to the younger one. "We're not authorized to. You are now Jerome." Cut in, pulling out his federal credentials once more and holding them steady in the air. "Am invoking oversight under federal civil protection law. If you delay this any further, it becomes obstruction." The tension in the room thickened. No one spoke. Finally, the older officer nodded stiffly and turned toward the wall-mounted console. He tapped through several menus, the monitors flickering until they landed on the hallway feed outside exam room 3B. The timestamp read 10:41 a.m. Monica walked in calm, composed, holding her tote bag close. She sat down. She never approached the doctor's countertop. She never touched anything but the chair and the door handle. At 10:52 a.m., Dr. Emerson exited the room. She glanced down at the tray where she claimed her Cartier watch had been, then touched her wrist, visibly startled. Her expression twisted into suspicion, and she stormed down the hall. "There," Jerome said, pointing. "Zoom in on the tray." The frame sharpened, revealing a silver gleam, the Cartier watch still lying untouched near a tissue box. Monica stared at the screen, her throat tightening. "She left it behind," she whispered. "Keep rolling," Jerome instructed. The footage moved forward. At 10:54 a.m., a cleaning staff member entered, quickly tidied the counter, then left. At 10:59 a.m., the watch was still there. Then the screen went black. "What happened?" Jerome asked sharply. That's the switch in camera coverage between shifts," the officer stammered. "There's a dead zone for about 5 minutes. How convenient," Jerome muttered. He retrieved Monica's phone from the drawer and handed it back to her, with care. "This will be included in our report," he said to the officers. "Prepare your written statements. The Department of Justice will be following up." Minutes later, Jerome and Monica were escorted upstairs to a sleek glass conference room. Waiting there were 3 visibly uneasy board members, 2 men and 1 woman, all white, all seated at the far end of the table. Dr. Emerson sat opposite them, arms crossed, chin lifted in defiance, but her eyes no longer gleamed with confidence. The head of the ethics board cleared his throat. "Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Reynolds, thank you for coming. We understand a serious incident has occurred. We're here to review and hear any formal grievances." Jerome stepped forward and placed a thin folder on the table. Inside are my wife's written statement, timestamped phone records showing her denied access to communication, and still images from your own surveillance system proving that Dr. Emerson's accusation of theft was entirely unfounded. Dr. Emerson scoffed. "I followed protocol. I had reason to suspect, you had reason to assume," Jerome cut her off coldly. "Assume she was alone. Assume she was poor. Assume she was untrustworthy based solely on how she looked and not on a single shred of evidence." Monica finally spoke, her voice calm and deliberate. "You didn't see a teacher. You didn't see a mother. You didn't even see a human being. You saw a stereotype. And because of that, I was humiliated, detained, and denied care in a place where I came to protect my unborn child." Dr. Emerson's face flushed red. "That's not how it happened." "But it is," Monica replied softly. "And your tone right now proves it." Silence filled the room. The board members shifted in their seats, clearly disturbed. The chair leaned forward. Mr. Reynolds, what action do you seek? Jerome's voice was steady. Immediate suspension of Dr. Emerson. A formal public apology from this institution. Mandatory anti-bias training for all staff. And full cooperation with the DOJ as we investigate this incident under civil rights law. The board chair nodded slowly. Well, begin proceedings immediately. Dr. Emerson stood her chair, scraping the floor, and stormed out of the room without a word. No one followed her. Monica exhaled deeply, her hand resting on her belly once again. Justice hadn't been fully served yet, but the system had finally been forced to look itself in the mirror. The fallout was swift. Within 48 hours of the ethics board meeting, Northbridge Women's Center issued a formal statement to the press. The carefully worded document acknowledged the incident involving Mrs. Monica Reynolds, described the accusations as serious procedural missteps, and confirmed that Dr. Gretchen Emerson had been placed on indefinite administrative leave pending a full internal review. The clinic promised an immediate audit of its patient rights protocols and announced the implementation of mandatory anti-bias training for all medical and administrative staff. The statement concluded with a public apology not only to Monica, but to any patient who may have felt unsafe, unheard, or unwelcome within our walls. But for Monica Reynolds, it was never just about one doctor or one apology. It was about a systema-polished smiling system that allowed this to happen so casually, so confidently, and without hesitation. 2 weeks after the ordeal, Monica stood at a portable podium outside the same clinic where she had once been detained. The morning sun glinted off the glass panels behind her, but this time she wasn't alone. To her left stood her husband Jerome, his arms crossed, his face calm but proud. To her right were representatives from local civil rights organizations, maternal health advocates, and even a few former patients of the clinic who had come forward with stories of their own. Behind her, a small crowd of supporters, reporters, and community members gathered with quiet focus. Monica wore a deep emerald dress, simple but elegant. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and her presence radiated quiet strength. She didn't read from notes. She didn't need to. Her voice was steady, resonant, and filled with purpose. This isn't just about what happened to me. She began, pausing to let the silence settle. It's about every Black woman who's ever walked into a doctor's office and felt invisible. It's about every mother-to-be who's been looked at as a problem before being treated as a person. The crowd stood motionless, hanging on every word. I went into that building because I believed it'd receive care, she continued. Instead, I was profiled, humiliated, and locked in a room like a criminal while carrying a life inside me. Not because of anything I did, but because of who I am, because of what I look like, because I didn't fit the picture of what that clinic thought their patients should look like. Monica paused and looked down for a moment at her growing belly. Her hand rested there gently, then she raised her eyes again. I speak today because I have to believe we can do better, that we must do better, for our daughters, for our sons, for the next generation who should never have to wonder if they'll be seen as human before they're seen as suspects. A wave of emotion rippled through the crowd. Several in the audience blinked back tears. Jerome beside her gave the smallest of nods, a quiet signal of pride and solidarity. I don't want revenge, Monica said firmly. I want reform. I want accountability. I want our medical institutions to see us, to hear us, to protect us, not profile us. Because when women like me speak up, it's not to tear anything down. It's to build something better, something stronger, something just. The press cameras clicked rapidly. A breeze caught the hem of her dress, but Monica didn't flinch. She stood tall, rooted in the power of truth. As her speech ended, the crowd broke into applause, not the wild kind you hear at a concert, but the kind that carries weight. A quiet thunder of hands clapping together in agreement, in understanding, and in hope. Later that evening, local news stations aired clips of Monica's speech. Her words circulated online, shared by advocates and community leaders nationwide. For many, it became a rallying cry, not only for the mistreatment she endured, but for the countless others who never got the chance to speak their truth. And for Monica Reynolds, it wasn't about being a hero, it was about being heard, about standing up not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been silenced. In the days and weeks that followed, Monica Reynolds returned to her life, but not in the same way she had lived it before. Something within her had shifted. She had walked through fire, and while the burns still stung, they no longer defined her. The community she once passed through quietly now embraced her with words of encouragement, letters, and even handwritten notes left in her mailbox. Women, especially Black women, reached out from across the country sharing stories that mirrored hers. Some had been denied care, others had been misjudged, many had been silenced. But now, because of Monica, they felt seen. She didn't seek fame. She didn't stand on stages for recognition. Instead, she attended local council meetings, participated in roundtable discussions on maternal health care, and worked closely with civil rights organizations to propose policy changes for how clinics handle racial bias complaints. One initiative, named the Reynolds Standard, was proposed statewide, requiring all private medical facilities to install continuous surveillance in non-invasive patient interaction areas and provide immediate patient access to recorded incidents upon request. For Monica, it wasn't just about her clinic experience. It was about building safeguards for the next woman who walked in alone and was treated as less. Jerome remained a steady presence by her side, supportive, vigilant, and deeply proud. The quiet strength that had carried him through years of public service now served a more personal purpose, helping his wife carry the weight of something much larger than either of them imagined. At home, he cooked more. He reminded her to rest. And every so often, when no one was watching, he placed his hand over her belly and whispered, "She's going to grow up in a better world because of you." One Saturday morning, as Monica sat on their porch with a cup of mint tea, her phone buzzed. A message popped up from a small clinic in Birmingham, Alabama. The director wrote to thank her. "Because of your voice, we've changed our intake procedures and staff training. You made us better." She smiled, not from vanity, but from something deeper, validation that her pain had found purpose. The media coverage had faded, but the impact had not. A journalism student from Howard University requested to interview her for a senior thesis on Black maternal advocacy. A church invited her to speak during their Women's History Month celebration. A nurse practitioner who had once worked with Dr. Emerson reached out to express regret for not speaking up sooner. Monica replied to each message thoughtfully with grace. She had no interest in revenge, only progress. As her due date approached, Monica took time to herself. She journaled. She planted herbs. She reread her favorite novels. And when anxiety tried to creep back in, reminding her of the cold room, the locked drawer, the gum-snapping guard, he breathed slowly, placed her hands on her belly and reminded herself, "You made it through. You rose above." The baby nursery in their home was nearly finished. Soft gray walls, yellow curtains, a hand-sewn quilt from her grandmother. In the center of the room stood a crib built by Jerome himself. On a shelf above it sat a framed photo from the day of Monica's speech. She stood with her chin high, her hand on her heart, and the world finally listening. On a quiet Sunday evening, Monica stood by that crib watching the sun pour through the window in golden ribbons. She placed both hands gently over her belly and whispered, "You are coming into a world that still needs work, but we're doing it. And well, keep doing it. For you." Then she smiled, not because everything had been made perfect, but because something had finally begun. A reckoning, a healing, a turning point wrapped in the strength of a woman who refused to be invisible, and that more than anything was the legacy her child would be born into. Monica Reynolds never set out to become a symbol. She didn't ask for headlines or platforms. All she wanted that morning was to receive the medical care every mother-to-be deserves. But what began as a routine prenatal checkup ended up uncovering a much deeper truth, one that had simmered beneath the surface of polite society for far too long. Through her experience, Monica gave voice to a quiet, persistent injustice, the way women of color, particularly Black women, are often viewed through a lens of suspicion, not care even in the most sacred and vulnerable moments of their lives. Her story traveled beyond Atlanta. Across state lines, hospitals and clinics began reviewing their training protocols. Legislators reached out. Advocates cited her case in public hearings. And patients, thousands of them, felt empowered to speak up, to report what had once been brushed off as miscommunication or standard procedure. The ripple effect was real. Monica had cracked open a space where silence once lived. But it wasn't just about policy. It was about presence. Monica didn't scream or rage. She didn't curse the system or demand pity. Instead, she stood tall, spoke clearly, and told the truth, not just for herself, but for every woman who had once felt invisible in an exam room, disrespected in a waiting room, or dismissed by someone who had taken an oath to do no harm. In that sense, Monica's legacy wasn't defined by confrontation, it was defined by conviction. Older viewers across the country, many of whom had seen generations of inequality unfold, found in Monica a familiar courage. She reminded them of the quiet strength their mothers had shown. She carried herself with dignity, not defiance. And in doing so, she reminded America that justice is not just about courtrooms or policies, it's about how we treat people when no one's watching. Monica's child will one day hear this story, not just of injustice, but of resilience. And when that time comes, they won't hear about a victim. They'll hear about a mother who stood firm, a father who defended her, and a community that rose with them. Because in the end, Monica didn't just walk out of that clinic with her head held high. She walked out having changed the temperature of the room and the country along with it. From Monica Reynolds' story, we learn that dignity, truth, and perseverance are not just personal value, they are tools for justice. Her quiet strength in the face of humiliation reminds us that real change often begins in the moments when we choose not to stay silent. For older adults who have witnessed decades of social progress and setbacks, this story reaffirms a lifelong truth: standing up even when tired or afraid still matters. It reminds us that every voice, especially those spoken calmly and with purpose, can shake walls and open doors. Whether it's speaking out at a town hall, advocating for a neighbor, or simply refusing to accept disrespect, our actions create ripple effects. Monica didn't just defend herself. She lit a path for others to walk more safely. Her story is a call to continue the legacy of resilience, one shaped not by shouting but by showing up with grace and refusing to disappear. In our communities, families, and institutions, change begins when someone dares to say, "This is not right, and I won't let it stand." If Monica's strength moved you today, if her quiet courage reminded you of the values we should all stand for, let her know she's not alone. Share your thoughts in the comments. What would you say to Monica if she were your daughter, your friend, or your neighbor? How should she continue her journey? Should she take her advocacy to Washington? Launch a support network for mothers, or simply take time to rest and heal? Your voice matters, especially to those who've been unheard for too long. Let's lift Monica up, not just in sympathy, but in solidarity. And if you believe stories like hers deserve to be told and remembered, comment the number 1 below to show your support.